Welcome to the Ecommerce Marketing Podcast, the highly rated digital marketing podcast that provides weekly digital marketing tips and strategies from some of the world's top digital marketers and e-commerce entrepreneurs that will help you take your digital marketing to the next level. Sit back and enjoy this power-packed episode hosted by Arlen Robinson, who is an e-commerce entrepreneur and digital marketing expert with over 20 years of experience. Hey, e-commerce marketing podcast listener. Are you looking to increase traffic and sales to your website? You can do this by launching your own affiliate program. Just visit getosi.com and sign up for a free trial today. That's getosi.com. Now get ready to hear from your e-commerce marketing expert of the week as they drill down to give you details on marketing strategies that can help grow your business.
Welcome back to the E-commerce Marketing Podcast, everyone. My name is Arlen, and I am your host. And today we have a very special guest, Deevo Tindall, who is an entrepreneur, holistic branding strategist, and content creator who redefines brand narratives with innovation and authenticity. Welcome to the podcast, Deevo.
Arlen, thanks for having me, man. Excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you for joining me. I'm super excited to talk to you. We're going to be diving deep into a kind of a different subject here. And I know you're going to shed some light into it. And that's going to be holistic branding and content strategy and really the power of authenticity, which I think is a big thing these days. I think a lot of times these days, people are looking for authentic brands. I think it's so I think you're kind of right on the pulse of what consumers want these days. And so you're going to be enlightening us on that. But, before we do get into all of that, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background and, how you got into what you're doing today?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I've had a myriad of opportunities throughout my life. I feel pretty blessed. I graduated college and went straight into the corporate workforce because that's what I thought I was supposed to do. I didn't realize that there was whole opportunities of entrepreneurial world out there for me at the time.
Sure.
But it's been a journey that I don't believe in regrets. All the stuff that I have learned in the corporate world has carried over into what I do as an entrepreneur and all the different businesses that I've launched and now I'm running. So I started working right away for a Fortune 50 company out in New York City at the time. I was a project manager, but to get started, I went into their executive management development program, where I learned literally the entire business in a consolidated 2-year program. And then when I graduated from that, they put me into a role out back in San Diego, where I oversaw the project management division, specifically operational projects. And we did a lot of marketing and branding. It wasn't called marketing and branding in the auspice of what we did, but that's why I had my first exposure to that world of the creative side of things. And then I just sort of fell in love with it. So I did that for almost 15 years. Simultaneously to that, I also was a photographer. I have been since I was 12 years old. So I have had a camera in my hand since I was a little kid. And I did photography sort of as a moonlight thing after my 9-to-5. And it wasn't until around 2005, 2006 that I really started trying to figure out ways that I could leave the corporate world and start branching out into my own space of entrepreneurialism. And then roughly in 2010, I left the corporate world and launched my first full-time entrepreneurial gig, which was Fusion Photography. And then there's a bunch of different steps that have happened since then where I am today.
Okay. That's awesome. Great story, man. Yeah. It's, I always applaud people that, have that entrepreneurial itch and then just, kind of dive into it. It's not for the faint of heart. Yes, running your own shop and kind of keeping everything going. It definitely has its ups and downs, but like and most entrepreneurs know that it's very rewarding because it's something that you've basically birthed from, conception all the way to wherever you're going to, grow it to.
Yeah. It's a crazy thing. If you don't have anybody as a mentor or somebody, an education centered around that entrepreneurial world, you don't really know what you don't know. And there's probably, lots of other people that have traveled the same journey as me that they're still kind of stuck in the 9-to-5, but they have these dreams, they have these visions of doing something different. But I think a lot of people don't really know how to break free from that. So it is an interesting, you're absolutely right. Like it takes a special person to jump into the space because, it's an all or nothing world. Like everything you do is dependent upon your survival. And so, it does take a special type of personality to take that risk on.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also a lot of times people, our whole kind of society now, there's a lot of focus on businesses, small businesses, and the whole being a boss, being your own boss. And when you look at the kind of exterior of all that, I think people, when you're looking from the outside in and you're not in business and you've never run anything, it kind of looks more easier, a lot easier than you may know. So I hear that from a lot of people. A lot of people really don't realize what it takes. They think you can just kind of set up shop, get some customers, and then you're a millionaire, an instant millionaire.
Yeah, it's crazy. People, I mean,
Yeah.
again, people don't know what they don't know. If you don't have any
Yeah.
context or experience for that situation, from the outside, everything looks glamorous, and
Yeah.
you get to
Sure.
dictate your own hours. You only work certain days of the week. You get the weekends off. It's like that couldn't be further from the truth. I suppose that's the dream that is the reality for some people, but early on when you first launch your business, I mean, you're eating ramen noodles and saltine crackers and working 16 hours a day. So it's like,
Yep.
at some
Exactly.
point you can get there if you're successful. If you market or die, you will get there, right? But it doesn't happen that way overnight, for sure, right, Arlen?
Exactly. Gotta market or die for sure.
That's right. You like that
Yeah,
plug I
man.
just gave you?
Yeah, appreciate that. All right. Well, when you signed up to be on the podcast, Deevo, you kind of brought a topic to my mind that when I thought about it, I was kind of familiar about it, but I never kind of heard it like that. And that's holistic branding. And why don't you tell us a little bit about really what that is and how does it differ from any traditional branding approaches?
Yeah, I mean, I think you probably get 10 different answers if you ask 10 different people. But from my perspective, what holistic branding is, it's about crafting a brand that resonates at every touch point in the customer journey and that of the brand. So what I mean by that is it's sort of it's a two-sided sword. So if you're a branding agency, you have to be able to, from a holistic perspective, how we see it is we start from the beginning with every company or client we work with. So we do brand discovery with them and we take a deep dive into who they are as a business. What do they stand for? What problems do they solve? What's their mission? What's their purpose? Why do they exist? Why did they decide to build this big audacious dream so that they could sell something to somebody? So what is the problems they solve? What's their purpose? And then from that point, in today's day and age, it's creating content around their purpose, around their values, around the problems they serve, and then using that content and using that information that we share with our audience to get them to compel them to buy, to become customers. And then how do you amplify that? So what are the digital marketing channels that can be amplified with your content and your story and your message and your purpose so that other people can find out about you? So it's a cradle to grave operational standpoint where we start from the beginning with the client, clarify who they are, what they do, why they do it, create content around that, and then we take all of that content and then we manage that holistically to amplify that brand for them. So paid channels, paid advertising, SEO, website optimization, all the things that help other people find your small business. And then on the other side of that, holistic branding is, as I said at the outset, it's every single touch point in the customer journey. So whether it be social media, whether it's how you answer your telephone calls, whether it's your customer service, whether it's the product that you deliver, every little piece in that puzzle of your solution, that whatever problem you're solving, it has to be holistically created so that every single time your customer engages with you, they're getting consistency. They're getting the common objective that you're trying to sell to them, the same story, the same type of answer, the same type of brand message, et cetera, et cetera. So does that make sense how I'm explaining it? Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely does. It really also sounds like you can't really move forward and apply any of this until you really truly understand who your consumer is. I think you've got to properly frame who your ideal customer is. You got to properly frame that avatar in order to create this whole brand narrative, around that, and then be able to reach these people should be the ideal customers, to reach them where they are. So I think that's the very important step.
Yeah, absolutely, and that all happens during the brand discovery. And if you're a small business owner, brand discovery is an iterative process because as you grow as a business, your brand can change and evolve, and who you are and what you stand for and the type of products. I mean, look at yourself. You've been in business for 23 years, and you started off as a web design company, and now you're building products specifically engineered to reach a specific type of niche market. So your brand, your story, your message has changed in the 23 years you've been in business. So if you're a new business and you're just getting started, or if you're an existing business and you're finding that you don't have clarity on who you are and who your niche market is and who your target customer is, that brand discovery will clarify that. And then once that messaging, that brand discovery piece is optimized, then you can take that and put that into everything that you do.
Yeah, very true. And speaking of putting that into everything that you do, we're kind of in an era saturated with so many brands, all of this different types of content. How does one ensure that their brand remains distinctive and true to their holistic vision across, all of these channels, all of these platforms, with, all of these partners they may be associated with that are trying to put out a brand narrative?
Yeah, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but really being very, very clear on your brand purpose. Why is it that you're in business? Who are you selling to? What problem do you solve? And really being very crystal clear on your brand message, because your brand message is everything that your ideal buyer sees. So when you see Coke, or when you see Kinko's, or you see FedEx, or you see anybody that you consume, like think about all the products that you love most, right? You buy those products because you had some sort of a resonant factor with that product. It wasn't necessarily the product per se, like that's important, right? But there was some sort of messaging in that space that you connected with that made you want to become a repeat buyer of that product. So, and that's your brand message. Again, that's that consistent delivery of your product, that consistent delivery of your message, and that consistency across all of your channels. So whether that's your Google reviews, whether that's your website, whether that's your social media, whether that's the content that you put out, whether that's the messaging from your CEO when he goes onto a podcast. If I showed up on one podcast and said X, Y, Z, and then I showed up on another podcast and was saying ABC about my company, and people are listening to it, they're going to have brand confusion. So consistency, and you talked about authenticity at the outset. It's a sort of an overused word, because now people are trying to overtly be authentic in order to become authentic. So they're like, do you follow me? Like it's like fraudulent authenticity. So, but genuinely, like, be genuine and authentic about your brand and the connections. Like I always tell everyone that I work with in our space is be very, very clear on what problem you're solving for your client. What is it that you do that's distinctly different from everyone else, and give them a reason to want to come back and use your product. And if you're not clear on what that value proposition is, and you're not authentically telling that in a story by building trust with your client or connecting with your client, then you're going to lose customers quickly, or never connect with those customers in the first place.
Yeah, that's very important. And I think the authenticity is key. And I think very important that if you're going to be authentic, you got to do it from the very beginning. You can't, like you said, if you switch things up, if you're, representing your brand a certain way for, when you start up, and then a year or two into the business, and then all of a sudden you switch. And it's not to say that a brand can't switch their identity and do things like that. But if you're kind of doing about face and go a totally different direction, that can be problematic, because these days people are savvy, and they'll sniff you out, and they'll be like, okay, they're this brand is not authentic. They're just doing anything they can to try to sell.
Yeah, Arlen, you're spot on that. And it is okay to switch. It is okay to make a pivot. But I would suggest, if you're going to be making a pivot and people knew you as such and such before you made the pivot, let's tell the story of why you're making the pivot. Let's talk about why you're changing your product line. Why are you changing your logo? Why are you changing the purpose of your business? What are the things that you're doing? And so that's what authenticity is. You're being transparent. You're allowing other people to see inside your business, so that they understand why you do what you do, and the problems that you solve, and why they would give you their time, energy, money, resources, etc. So if you're going to make a switch, just be authentic about it and share the reasons why you're doing it.
Yeah, very true. You're right. Yeah, as long as you're transparent about it, like you said, then the audience, your consumers, will then still trust your brand and can still follow you. Now, I'm always a huge advocate on kind of learning from the mistakes of others. So I wanted to see, what would you think is the biggest mistake that you see brands making when they're trying to create authentic content and put it out there?
Well, I think this really applies for small businesses, but I think in general, anybody trying to rush the process and expecting immediate results. I do a lot of constructive counsel and coaching with small businesses and photographers early on in my career. And one of the things I saw very early is that everyone expected immediate results. It's like, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur and I just want to make my own hours. I want to do my own things. And I have all this money and I want to like travel all over the world. And, and I travel a lot. So I would literally get people like, I just want to travel like you. And I was like, dude, I've been doing this for 20 years. Like my first few years in business, my first basically 5 to 10 years in business, like I wasn't traveling all over the world. I was working night and day to build this brand, to connect with people. And I made a shit ton of mistakes and I had to start over in a bunch of different ways to retweak what didn't work. So I think people try to rush the process would be my number one. I think the second piece is lack of clarity. Again, what is it you do? Why do you do it? What problems do you solve? And if you're not very clear on those, you don't have clarity around those really 3 pillars of your business, that's a really fast way to set yourself up for having to repeat the measures and start things over and rework where you made mistakes on some of your business. I think another thing, we've talked about it already, but authenticity. I think a lot of people try to be so trendy, especially with social media. We have these channels where we can share everything that we're doing now, and people always just want to be really trendy. And like what ends up happening, and I just did a blog on this last week, is you start copying so many different models that you've lost focus on what your model actually is. So you're picking up something from over here, you're picking up something over here, and you're trying to like literally mimic everything that you see everyone else is doing instead of really focusing. And I think I'd like to make a caveat to that. I think it's okay to sample early on, especially if you're an early entrepreneur and you're not really quite sure what it is that you're best at. And so you're kind of playing in different sandboxes. But at some point, you're going to have to stand on your own 2 feet and say, this is my business. I'm drawing a line in the sand. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to do it. This is the problem I'm going to solve. And stop trying to mimic what everyone else does. Because you're right. Consumers are really freaking smart and they'll sniff right through that. So really stay true. Once you've really figured out and you have that clarity, don't try to be anyone else. Focus on your unique story. Tell that story. Really do a good job of telling your story, because it's the storytelling piece in your brand that's going to connect with your buyer. Because again, people connect on an emotional level with your brand. And if they don't have that emotional connection, they're going to look for something else somewhere else.
Yeah. That's very, very true. Yeah. I mean, I hear that all over and over again, as far as stories are concerned. That's really what connects to people. It's they always say, what is the saying? Stories sell, not facts and figures and features. It's the stories, the connection. And I know from my own self, I was actually just earlier today, I was looking at one of our client sites. It was a brand I wasn't familiar with, and I was just trying to figure out, all right, what's the backstory? They had their own D2C site, and I'm always the first page I usually go to. Like I'll kind of peruse the homepage and try to figure out, okay, what exactly are they doing? Who are they trying to service? Who is their ideal customer? And then I immediately will go to the about page or their our story page, because I'm really always curious about how did this brand come into existence? Who are the founders? What did they do? And I think a lot of people are that same way. They want to kind of connect. They want to form that connection with the founders and who's running the company. Why did they start it? What are their what's their mission? That type of thing. So I think that's really big these days.
Yeah, and it can be anything, really. Truthfully speaking, like no 2 people are alike, and no 2 people connect with the brand for the same reasons necessarily. There might be variations of the same reason, but everybody sort of has their own context and their own story that they bring to the table when they're looking for something. Whether I think about yourself, what is your process when you look for a new restaurant? Right, you probably go to Google. You want to see what's nearby first and foremost, because you don't want to drive 2 hours to get someplace. And then what do? You look at the restaurant. Okay, I'm looking for this type of food. So you sort of already know what it is that you want to eat. So you're looking for those types. You can filter that down. And then what's the next thing you do? At least if you're like most people, they go straight to the reviews. What are other people saying about the brand? And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be 5 stars, but you should have sort of a consistent feel from the experience that you're giving your customers in the anecdotal responses that your clients are sharing. And again, it's okay to have a bad review. I'm not saying that you have to be perfect. I'm just saying that the messaging, the service, the product that you deliver should be consistent across the board, so that when other people are seeing it, they're understanding who you are, what you are, why they should give you their money. And that's sort of what I mean by all the things that I'm saying.
Yeah, very, very true. Now, if we hone in now on particularly on e-commerce businesses with regards to this holistic branding, are there any notable success stories that you're familiar with that you can kind of that have embraced holistic branding and have done a good job doing it that you can highlight?
Yeah, all my clients.
Okay.
But I would say I was trying to think about this question because you sent it to me in advance, and I was trying to think like what's a notable product that really a lot of people might recognize. You and I both wear eyeglasses, so have you heard of a company called Warby Parker?
Yep, I have. Yeah, they're huge.
Yeah, so Warby Parker they didn't start off huge, but they started
Yeah.
off, very clearly trying to figure out what it was that they wanted to create so they could connect with their people, tell their story, provide affordable, stylish eyewear that still enabled them to give back to the community. So they give back wherever they are, they give back. Like it's a massive part of their business. So their entire branding revolves around a really strong mission to provide affordable, stylish eyewear and giving back to the communities in which they exist. And so they do this really cool thing. For every pair of glasses they sell, they donate a pair to someone in need, which is really fantastic.
Yeah.
And they collect these stories from their customers. So if you were to go into a store and buy a pair of Warby Parker glasses, they're going to ask you to sort of, can you think of anybody who also might need these that might not be able to afford a pair of glasses or needs their eyes checked or something of that nature? And so what they've done is they've created this user-generated content. They've created this anecdotal, testimonial-driven business that empowers their consumers to share, because everyone loves to help out. Like at the root of the day, we're not evil people. Like everyone wants to say they contributed and helped in some way, shape, or form, right? So if I can go home and say, I turned somebody on to these pair of glasses and they're going to get a free pair of glasses, like that's a feel-good story, right? So they were really, really clear on their mission-driven branding. They have a consistent user experience across the board. If you go to any of their stores, the same sort of messaging, the same sort of visuals, the same sort of marketing, the same sort of branding. And if you go to their social media, everything is about storytelling. Literally everything they do is about telling the story. The people that wear their glasses, how they make their glasses, why they do what they do, the mission, the purpose, the values. And so they've done a really good job of connecting with a huge audience that might not necessarily be exposed to them, but are still willing to use their product because of all the different touch points in that customer journey that they're touching on through their branding and their marketing.
Yeah. They're a great example. Yeah, great job. They've done a great job, like you said, with that story. I mean, I remember when I first heard about them. This was like, wow, 10, 15, almost 20 years ago. I think I first heard about them. They were featured on Oprah a long time ago, and that's how I first heard about them. And then right even at that very beginning, she had the founders on. I think she interviewed them, and that's what their initial focus was on that mission. And helping out any money they brought in, helping others. They had a mission to empower other countries where eyeglasses were hard to come by. And yeah, I mean, I remember that from the very beginning, and they've been consistent all the way through. So yeah, that's a great example and an excellent company to highlight.
Yeah, and the output of what they've done, which is really, it's sort of a case study for anybody who wants to understand this type of business. Their customers aren't buying glasses; they're buying the brand. They're buying they buy the brand story, and because it's compelling, it's endearing, it's resonant, it's touching, and so people really connect. And then that whole thing, all those words I just threw out, those adjectives, those are all emotional touch points. So if you can figure out as a brand, how do you connect with your buyer? How do you connect with your audience? How do you connect with people who want to sort of, you may not know about your product, but really love your story? They're going to connect with your story first, and then they're going to learn about your brand second. And that's how you'd make that emotional connection with people.
Yeah, exactly. You're totally right. People, they get the brand because of that, because of their name and because of what they're involved in. I mean, especially with like eyeglasses, because there's a million and one different brands, and especially if you can pretty much choose anything. They're for the most part they're frames, or of course there's lenses. You can wear a million and one things and you're going to have the same result, but people choose to go that route because of their mission and because of the things that they're involved in, and that's really important. Well, Deevo, as we get ready to wrap things up, I wanted to see how you envision the whole overall interplay between authenticity, content, and brand value evolving in the next 10 years.
That's a great question. I think that social media is perpetually evolving. So what I'm seeing is that social media in of itself used to be more of a staged, everything has to be perfect sort of interplay.
Yeah.
Your content has to be perfect. Your messaging has to be perfect. You have to play by the rules of this algorithm and that sort of stuff. But because consumers have access to so much different information, and because there are so many different social media channels where you could share your message, the direction started to shift a few years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago, to more, I don't want to call it less cultivated content or less curated content, but more let's hear about the story, more authentic, more let me see behind the lens. I want to know what's going on behind the doors of your building, behind the doors of your story. And so I think you're going to start seeing with this demand for authenticity, since we keep using that word, consumers are just way too freaking smart, man. And they're going to and they're going to sniff right through, as I've said before. So I think you're going to start seeing more user generated content, more interaction from social media, more involvement with the consumer, and putting more power into the consumer's hand. I think content's going to become more personalized and more interactive. And you're already starting to see this with video and all the different pieces of interactivity you can do on websites, through social media. And I think brand value it's ultimately going to be measured by the impact we can make on our customers' lives.
Yeah.
And that really goes back to what I said at the outset. What problem are you solving? How can you share that message with your consumers on how you're going to make their lives better? And that can come in a variety of ways. You can either be entertainment, you can be educating, you can be inspiring, you can be physically providing a product that meets some of their needs. But in the end, it's really going to come down to what impact are you making on the customers' lives? And I think that because primarily of social media, that's just going to continue to grow.
Yeah. Very, very true. And I totally agree. It was like kind of like a few years ago, we started to see the shift of, people don't really want to see just the kind of the glossy type of presentations these days, where companies are putting out, just their typical elevator pitch type thing. They want to see, of course they want to know what the brand is about. What is it that they're offering? Is it going to meet my needs? But it's really more wanting to see, all right, how did they get to that point? What's, who are the players behind the scenes? And that's more what people are kind of interested in. And it's these days it's since everything is really out there, it's easy to get that information. And I think brands understand that, and they just start off now from the gate just kind of putting it out there, just kind of putting the truth out.
Well, it's crazy because, if I may, for a few seconds, just sort of dive into that, because the generations beneath us, and we're probably roughly around the same age, I would assume, but because of the generations beneath us have had access to more information than we ever had when we were growing up, they're sort of already saturated in this space, and they already have a completely different context on what options they have available to them. And they have a plethora of options. Like, that's crazy to me. My daughter can literally get on her phone at 10 o'clock at night and order food and have it delivered directly to her door, and basically have anything she wants delivered to our door. And I'll get the ring of the doorbell, and I'll answer it. It's like a coffee, it's some sushi, and a chocolate bar. And I'm like, first of all, who told you could order food? And second of all, like, who are you? But that's just a small example of, because we have so much information and so much access to so much, it's really, really important that whatever you're providing, whatever service you're doing, that you're very crystal clear on how you can make yourself available to people, because we have so many choices. If we don't get what we want here, I'm just going to browse and thumb up to the next one. If I don't get what I want here, I'm just going to thumb up to the next one. So you have to be, and you only have a few seconds to sell that message, which is crazy. So it's an interesting time to be alive. Sometimes I shake my head at it and I'm just like, why? But all in all, it's pretty fantastic, because never before, I mean, this podcast alone, where would I have had the chance to do this 10, 15 years ago, to share my personal message with the world and all of your listeners, if I didn't have this information, access to this podcast, this technology? It's like mind blowing to me, and how fantastic it really is.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, definitely well said. And it's a lot of times, I think also it's kind of a blessing and a curse that people have all access to all this information and all of these options, because if you're a brand and you're you're not on your P's and Q's, like you said, it's easy enough for somebody to just swipe left, swipe right, close the page, and then there's a million and one other brands that they can go after and get service and get products from. So yeah, it makes it tougher for brands.
Well, it does make it tougher, but it also makes it more opportunistic. It depends on how you look at it, because you could just fold your arms and say, F it. I don't have the time to do all that. How am I supposed to keep up with all this? But you can keep up with it if you're very strategic about it. If you take some time to take a pulse of who you are and what your brand does and how you want to show up in the world, for relatively inexpensive resources, you can get on social media, you can get on podcasts, you can start talking about all the things that you do and connect with different types of audience that you would have never had the chance to connect with. So, it is a double-edged sword. There are some downplays to it, but again, if you're in business and you're trying to run a business and you're trying to market yourself to a larger audience, I refuse to hear the excuse, I just don't have time for it, because if you make it a priority, if you make a plan, if you strategize about it, you can very easily connect with people and do all sorts of things that you would have never had the opportunity to do before 10 years ago. So it's a fantastic time to be alive in business as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, you're very true, very true. Things are definitely a lot different than those 23 years ago when I started, when the internet was at its infancy. So you're totally right. It's it's a great time to be in business for sure. Well, Deevo, this has been an awesome conversation. I definitely love the topic. It's definitely very timely for any brand that's in business. How to make sure that you're organically, you're making sure that your narrative resonates through everything that you do, and then you're authentic about it. So it's very important. So I know I learned a lot, and I know our listeners and viewers have as well. But lastly, before we let you go, to close things out, I always like to switch gears just so our audience can get to know you a little bit better. And so I just wanted to see what's one closing fun fact about yourself that you think our listeners and viewers would be interested to know.
I don't know. I'm a Renaissance dude. I'm into a lot of different things. That's been my problem as a business owner, because I really like to do a lot of different things. Yep. So sometimes I really have to just sort of do a self-check and like rein myself back in, because that's a project that I can start a little bit later, but I really need to focus on this one. But when I'm not running my businesses and traveling, I have two children, two daughters. So they're teenagers now. So in of itself, that is a handful to manage that. I've been relatively blessed. They're pretty good kids for the most part. But by and large, they take up a lot of my time. I play soccer, an adult soccer league. That's always fantastic. It's how I stay in shape. I travel the world. I try to do at least 3 international trips every year. And I just recently signed up for deep water scuba diving, because I really want to do some deep water scuba photography. Like underwater with deep crash sites and things like that. Really explore that. So. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. That's that. There's a few things.
Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah. You got to keep it interesting. You got to keep involved in a lot of stuff. Yeah, that's definitely, I know, of course, your daughters first and foremost, I know, keep you busy, especially with 2 teenage daughters. I know you got your hands full there, but good stuff. Scuba diving as well. It's definitely something that, I like to do myself. I did like an intro class one time in a big dive pool. As far as I went, but I may eventually do it. Get a little bit further into it. It's definitely interesting, and I know you as a photographer, a lot of cool stuff you can see at some of these scuba diving sites, and like you said, crash sites where there's wreckage and stuff like that. Pretty cool.
I was in Honduras recently and just doing some regular snorkeling, but some of the reef area where we were, the reef in itself is fantastic, but there was a wreck. I don't know if it was like rumored to be like a pirate ship or something from some other time, and they had just discovered it. And so a bunch of the people that I was traveling with, they were already scuba certified, and they got to actually go out and dive down there with some of the people and see it. And some of the photos they brought back was like, dude, I'm going home and I'm getting signed up for this, because I don't want everyone to miss out on an opportunity like that again.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. Well, good stuff. Well, thank you for sharing that, Deevo. I appreciate that. Lastly, before we do let you go, if our listeners and viewers want to reach out to you and pick your brain anymore, about this topic of their brand and authenticity and the holistic vision for their brand, what's the best way for them to reach you?
I'm going to say Instagram, just because I'm playing in that sandbox daily. You can find me at Fusion Photog, Fusion Photog. And if I shamelessly may say, I also have a podcast called A Little Impolite. We're in our 4th year, not as long as you, Arlen, but
Awesome.
trying to really grow that. I would love for your listeners to check it out. It's a fantastic podcast. Really, the theme around it is unlearning everything we've been taught.
Okay.
Yeah, so Little Impolite, or on Instagram at Fusion Photog.
Okay, great. Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. We'll definitely, have the links to those in the show notes so people can connect with you. And definitely, it's been awesome talking to you, Deevo. We really appreciate you coming on the E-commerce Marketing Podcast.
Thank you for having me on, man. It's been fantastic, Arlen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the E-commerce Marketing Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share it with everyone you know. Are you looking to take your digital marketing to the next level but are tired of weeding through countless YouTube videos with unproven and untrusted marketing strategies? Well, we have the answer for you. The More Sales Every Month online digital marketing course. In this information-packed course, you will learn effective keyword research, link building, content marketing, and much more to attract and convert your site visitors into paying customers. Just go to moresaleseverymonth.com and sign up today for a low one-time fee. In addition to this power-packed course, if you would like to get access to a growing repository of digital marketing articles, PDFs, and ebooks, check out getosi.com/resources and opt in to get full access to our library of priceless marketing information to help you take your digital marketing to the next level.